Welcome everyone, both friend and stranger, old and new, to this time of worship in the Unitarian tradition. My name is Diane Rutter and I'm the lay assistant here at Kingswood Meeting House, which is in Hollywood in the West Midlands. My thanks as always go to Peter Flower, whose dedication, technical skills, musical abilities and patience allow us to keep the Kingswood community alive, thriving and worshipping here in Hollywood. So let's begin our service today by lighting our chalice candle, as do many Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists the world over. And we do this to mark a time set aside for the divine. And our chalice lighting words today are by Rachel Naomi Riemann. We are all here to grow in wisdom and learn how to love better. As we each do this in our own way, we slowly become a blessing to those around us and a light to the world. My first reading for you today is from the book of Genesis in chapter 1. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And so it was. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called the seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it." And so it was. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with seed in it. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. And so we come to a time of silent reflection and prayer. So as we settle into the rhythm of our worship, we bring before God all that has touched us in the past week. Things that have vexed and worried us. Things that have brought joy and laughter. And we think of those who love and care for us and those for whom we love and care. So now, in a time of silent reflection, let us ask of God what is needful. Loving God, we thank you for healing, help, and hope. May we show our appreciation of your love in our lives by the care we show to one another and to the outside world. And I invite you to join with me in saying the words of the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. My second reading for you today is called The Gardener's Prayer, and it's by Rhonda M. Give me the sunshine, so my flowers stand tall. Give me the time to care for them all. Give me the rain when their soil is dry. Let me achieve beauty for all who pass by. Give me the warm breeze to enjoy my flowers' sway. Give me the enjoyment of a child at play. Give me the secret to letting them go when winter creeps in and they're buried in snow. Lord, hear my gardener's prayer. Let me reap as I sow in that soil. Give me a beautiful garden. Springy sprung, the grasses riz, I wonder where the lawnmower is. So did Spike Milligan write of the old adage that some of us know about the Boyds. You might wish to note that the parsonage lawn has had its first cut of the season too. It was looking very good last week, Dal. One of the joys of the weekly forum Zoom meetings of a Monday morning is what plant orders have been placed or received by Mel Matthews. Now, Mel, as many of you know, is one of the longest serving members of Withell Gardening Club, and he was part of the team that won a Chelsea gold medal back in the day. Well, during lockdown, Mel has really been getting into the hang of ordering his plants online, in bulk. And we are hopeful of helping him with the excess in the not too distant future, for a charitable donation, of course. Because now is the time to see which of our many stored seeds are viable. I've just learned a nifty way of finding this out. You take a glass of water, empty your packet of seeds into it. If after a while they float, they're no good, throw them away. If they sink after a while, give them a go by seeing if they'll sprout on a damp piece of kitchen roll in a small tub. I've just done this with some tomato seed, and for those of you who wish to know, it's Sweet Millions, those lovely little cherry tomatoes. Well, the seeds were dated 2014 and their best before date was 2016, but I thought I'd give it a go, and lo and behold, it worked. So I look forward to enjoying lots of lovely little cherry tomatoes later in the season. Now, the only reference to a specific gardener in the Bible is in John chapter 20, verse 15, when the women go to the tomb to see the body of Jesus, to dress it properly, and it's open, it's not there. And they speak to the gardener, whom we suppose to be the risen Jesus. So not many mentions of specific gardeners, but there are lots of mentions of gardens, starting with the Garden of Eden. It's symbolism for being the perfect habitat. Gardens were the playgrounds of the rich and royalty. Your average ancient Israelite understood the toil of the fields, but not necessarily the pleasure of a garden in which to take their leisure. But I should imagine that nearly every housewife in those times had a supply of herbs to hand, either in a pot or a tiny little plot of ground. I've got a lovely book with drawings by Heath Robinson about gardening. It's very funny, and some of Robinson's eccentric gadgets are fabulous. Wouldn't it be marvellous if we had a gadget for everything in our lives, to cure all ills, poverty, create peace, end famine, etc.? Because gardening is a struggle between nature and nurture. Many abhor what gardeners have done, producing hybrids, etc., but flowers wouldn't grow in such abundance if gardeners didn't garden. Lots of them would be overshadowed by the big shrubs. Mind you, some of the big shrubs that have been brought over, particularly from the Himalayas, have got out of their natural habitat and they've had to be brought severely to heel. Just think of the rhododendron all over the Rivington estate in Lancashire, where I spent many of my years wandering happily. The rhododendrons there have had to be chopped back because they've hidden everything. And just think of Japanese knotweed. Can't buy a house if that's on the plot. On one of the gardening club holidays, I was lucky enough to visit Brownsea Island down south with the two Anns, Hebbing and Dale. It was a lovely, stunning boat trip out of Poole Harbour over to the island. And the National Trust now own it, but from 1927 to 1961, it was owned by the eccentric recluse Mary Bonham Christie, who wanted it to be a place of nature. She let the heath, the dairy herds, the woodlands and the rats run wild. And when the National Trust took it over, it took a long time to bring it back into some form of repair. As Jill recounted in her story for Coffee Morning on Tuesday this week, the original scout camps by Baden-Powell were held there on Brownsea Island. And whilst nature reserves are very much appreciated, some form of work has to be done to allow things to thrive. It's a balance of nature and nurture. As any dedicated follower of gardening fashion knows, nature needs a little help. We wouldn't have meadows if forests weren't cut down. We wouldn't have healthy woodlands and forests if undergrowth wasn't cleared and thinned out. And we would have many more barren places if topsoil wasn't replaced and trees planted, paths reinforced and water controlled. Only this week I watched a video clip on YouTube about how an area of Kenya has been regreened. The villagers have dug little moon-shaped divots in the ground, and this allows water to collect a bit more, and it's gradually greening the area. Well, I went to look for the story again to find out a bit more, and I didn't find that one, but I did find many clips about how many different countries are using different methods to push back the desert or to stop their towns and villages from becoming desert. And I came across something I hadn't heard of before, the Great Green Wall of Africa. The aim is to stop the Sahara Desert expanding. If this project gets off the ground, it will be the largest living structure on Earth, 5,000 miles long, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea. Now, in the creation story, the ancient Israelites show their understanding of this need to steward the earth and its resources. God worked to create, mankind worked to maintain it. This was their religious truth and their understanding. You work to gain understanding and you work to maintain it. And Jesus often used agricultural themes in his parables. Mustard seeds, stony ground, good earth, vines. These are all things that were understood by the people he preached to. The varieties of plants and the conditions they need to thrive are many and varied, just as humankind enjoys many ways of living and believing. One is not better than the other, just different. And of course, we all have our preferred ways of nurturing ourselves. God's great spirit susurrates throughout our lives, as does the wind through the fields of wildflowers. Breath, spirit and wind are the same word in the creation story. In the same way that life was breathed into the world, we breathe life into ideas that become living projects that enhance our lives and the lives of others. All through our lives, we work hard to gain knowledge that will help us lead our lives in a good way. We search for that which will enhance our spirituality. For me, this doesn't often come in large tomes or ingenious theories, and certainly not in dogmas or creeds. That which I can see about me every day in the natural world is one of my greatest teachers. Plants need sunlight and rain, nutrients from the earth. And did you know that nothing mankind has invented thus far can mimic true rainfall? So too, we need food for the soul as well as the body. Even deserts can sustain life. In Africa, the project, or rather the intention of the project, is not to get rid of the desert, just to stop it from growing any larger. One of the most exotic flowers I have ever encountered was in a glass house in Perth, Australia. Outside, the temperature was at least 24 degrees centigrade, and here was a flower that needed to grow in a glass house. Sturt's desert pea, a beautiful scarlet flower that blooms in the tremendous heat of the Australian desert. There is always life in the desert. Life is amazing in its ability to adapt. But the blooming of a desert is a miraculous sight to behold. Seeds that have lain dormant for decades suddenly come to life and reproduce. They bloom for a season and then are gone again, not to reappear for decades more. And sometimes the Spirit moving through my life is like the great wet that comes to the desert that makes it bloom. And of course, every flower needs a pollinator, and bees, some of our most prolific pollinators, are now a great cause for concern the world over. If we don't have pollination, we will have nothing. Everything, absolutely everything we eat depends upon pollination. So let's plant things that will feed the bee population and help maintain it. Chris Packham, earlier this month, posted a plea on Facebook to gardeners not to tidy up their gardens until the constant daily temperature is in double figures centigrade. Tidying up too early could kill off much needed pollinators and other insects that help our plants grow. So too do we need to care for ourselves. We are the pollinators of our faith. If our spirits are not pollinated by things spiritual, then we will not increase, and we will leave nothing behind. There will be no future generations. Did you know that in the search for ever more variety of colour, shape and size, plants can become sterile? What is so wrong with enjoying what we have without too much interference? To breed yourself out of existence is a nonsense. And plants give us much in life. Peas gave us the whole theory of genetics. Many hungovers are grateful for aspirin. Herbs enhance our food and flowers our souls. Each of you is a gardener. Each of you a garden. And we flourish by swapping seeds, plants, tips and encouragement. If we lovingly nurture one another, we will grow. As any gardener knows, the state of a garden depends very much on the amount of work you put in. We do well here, but of course a gardener's work is never finished. Kingswood Meeting House is blessed with beautiful grounds that we are able to have maintained by both paid and volunteer workers, as is our congregation. The work is ceaseless. So too must be the willingness of the workers. As my mother used to say, none of us is born with guaranteed an easy life stamped on our backs. If only. Let the work of the Lord be joyful. Don't make it hard for yourself. There is much pleasure to be gained from many different types of garden, but you will need to work at it. The level of input is your own decision. If you don't like the outcome, then you only have yourself to look to. Sometimes the task will be arduous, and sometimes it will be a pleasure. And the ancient Israelites had an explanation as to why their agricultural life could be hard. In the story of Adam and Eve, God ejects them from the Garden of Eden for eating forbidden fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. As he does so, he tells Eve that pain in childbirth is her lot, and Adam that the ground shall be cursed because of him. And in toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth to you. And you shall eat the plants of the fields. By the sweat of your face you shall eat the bread until you return to the ground. That's one way of explaining it. You reap as you sow is another. As our chalice lighting said at the beginning of our service, we are all here to grow in wisdom and learn how to love better. As we each do this in our own way, we slowly become a blessing to those around us and a light to the world. Amen. And I leave you with words today by Gary Kowalski. Go in peace, speak the truth, give thanks each day. Respect the earth and her creatures, for they are alive like you. Care for your body, it is a wondrous gift. Live simply, be of service, be guided by your faith and not by your fear. Go lightly on your path and walk in a sacred manner. Amen.